Okay, so next, of course, got America I, a poem by E. Cummings, an ironic poem, mocking, parodying the patriotic tone and rhetoric of, in this case, American politicians when making speeches. It's written in the form of a sonnet, which is ironic, purposefully ironic, to parody the idea that loving one's country is something to be admired. Clearly, E. Cummings does not believe this to be the case, so he's using the form of a sonnet ironically. As a sonnet, this doesn't conform to the traditional types of sonnet, the Italian sonnets and the Shakespearean sonnets, which were love songs, and this clearly isn't. But it's a very clever use of form to get across his point, which is that blindly loving one's country is clearly, according to Cummings, a stupid thing to do. This can be seen in other poems throughout the anthology, and it's worth thinking back to Flag by John Agard and the cynicism he puts across in that poem about patriotism. Also, the form of a sonnet normally follows several strict patterns, but modern sonnets have veered away from that to just include 14 lines with shifts in meaning and tone where the poet feels it's necessary. And in this case, we have to go all the way down to line 13 before we get any coherent standard language. He spoke and drank rapidly a glass of water, which is a description of this person talking. The first 13 lines are spoken very quickly. There is very little emphasis on any one word. It's rhetorically, it's full of rhetorical gunk, if you like, lots of very patriotic, jingoistic language that means nothing, and that's the point, E. Cummings' point, that words in themselves are very convincing, but they mean very little. So the first 13 lines are supposed to be spoken quickly, and you can see this here where he says gory, which is possibly a mispronunciation of golly, but speaking so quickly that it doesn't necessarily articulate what should be said. And then you get at the bottom the description of him speaking and drank rapidly a glass of water, and you can read whatever you want into that if you like. There's a lack of punctuation, which gives us a strong suggestion that this is to be interpreted in from the reader's point of view. You know, why drink rapidly? What's that covering up? You know, who is this person speaking? Why is this such an important thing to be said? But why do they find it so difficult? And why does E. Cummings similarly think it's all nonsense? So it's a sarcastic poem. It's almost a stream of consciousness. There is no punctuation. It's drivel, purposefully created so, and it contains a whole load of references to very important American patriotic language. So you have lots of references to the land of the Pilgrims, America, I love you, by the dawn's early, reference to the national anthem. Things that are important to Americans, they're part of the American psyche, they're things that people trot out and speak without perhaps reflecting on what it means and what is being asked of you. And you can tell that it's sarcastic through phrases like this here, and so forth. You know, a throwaway phrase which the speaker is able to put in, because in the minds of the listener, a patriotic listener, they fill in that gap themselves. And the sarcasm is continued throughout. So if we read a little bit, it says, "'Tis of centuries come and go, and are no more. What of it we should worry, if in every language, even deaf and dumb, thy sons acclaim like your glorious name, by gory, by jingo, by gee, by gosh, by gum. Why talk of beauty? What could be more beautiful than these heroic happy dead, who rushed like lions to the roaring slaughter? They did not stop to think, they died instead." Which is... this sort of language here is often used by politicians to praise people who've died for their countries. Here, E.E. Cummings is using it to mimic that, but also to criticise it. Heroic happy dead is oxymoronic even. There's no heroism in death, and the adjective happy would emphasise his sarcasm there. And similes like "who rushed like lions into the roaring slaughter," used by politicians and leaders to add drama, to add emphasis to the bravery of these people. And again, he's mimicking that to demonstrate how stupid it is with this phrase, the roaring slaughter. That's a phrase that could never be listened to without fear, yet when in a patriotic fervour, which most of us would be, we tend to conform to what's around us. We follow the flag, we follow the colours, we follow the country, we follow the leader, and very few people diverge from that. They did not stop to think, they died instead. And this is the main criticism from E.E. Cummings of people, of us, of himself, of everybody, is that we don't stop to think for ourselves. We follow like sheep, to use another simile, and end up pointlessly serving our country when we could think for ourselves. So, as I've already mentioned, important links. So, important poems to link this to from a patriotic point of view is the poem Flag and The Charge of the Light Brigade. Both have a slightly different take on patriotism. And in terms of conflict, Hawk Roosting is a great one to compare with this. The Yellow Palm and The Right Word also. There are obvious and clear links between them. However, it's important to remember that whilst poets like Cummings and Agard are using sarcasm, they are being sarcastic, they are being ironic, that others aren't. Ted Hughes, for example, in Hawk Roosting, isn't necessarily talking about the hawk as a metaphor for anything else. However, it's really easy to see how it could be a metaphor, but you could look at Hawk Roosting just from a naturalistic point of view of how things work, how things are in the grand scheme of things, the nature of things.